Right now on Morning News Now, investigators are combing through the scene after a fireball engulfed a passenger plane in Japan. As we're learning new details about how the crew was able to safely evacuate the nearly 400 people on board as black smoke and flames billowed from the fuselage. Plus, border battle. The Biden administration is asking the Supreme Court to intervene in a border fence dispute with Texas. This as federal officials say they're going to reopen several southern border crossings. We're digging into the impact of those closures and the decision to reopen them. A Hamas leader killed not in Gaza, but north of Israel in Lebanon. What we've learned about his death and the growing concerns it could broaden the crisis in the Middle East. Harvard's president is out, the major announcement after the backlash to her testimony about anti-Semitism and plagiarism allegations. What she's saying about her departure after just months on the job. And it's the Stanley Cup craze that has nothing to do with hockey. How a simple tumbler went from construction sites to one of the most sought-after holiday gifts and multiplied company sales more than 10 times. I'm a fan.
Okay, I don't know anything about this. I like hockey, but
nothing to do with hockey.
So
you don't see things on TikTok, so you don't know.
Right.
It's the whole craze.
I will learn all about it. Good morning, I'm Joe Breyer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. It's good to have you with us. We're going to start this hour with that fiery collision in Tokyo between a passenger jet and a Japanese Coast Guard plane. On the latter, 5 crew members were killed. Miraculously, though, all 379 people on board the passenger jet were able to escape despite a broken intercom and smoke filling the cabin.
This morning, we're learning more about those terrifying moments. Investigators are on the scene, combing through the charred wreckage, trying to figure out exactly how this happened. NBC News foreign correspondent Janice Mackey-Frayer is in Tokyo and has the very latest.
Investigators are combing through the crash site at Haneda Airport, which is just behind me. On-ground collisions between aircraft are very rare, so they're trying to determine exactly what happened. Japan Airlines put out a statement saying that Flight 516 from Sapporo was given clearance to land at Haneda, but then the surveillance cameras at the airport showed that when the plane did touch down, it appeared to hit something on the runway and then burst into flames, eventually skidding all the way down to the end of the runway to a stop, engulfed in flames. Inside, the cabin was filling with smoke, filling with panic. All 379 people on board, passengers and crew, were safely evacuated. They jumped out of the plane through black smoke, through sparks, through fire. Some are calling it a miracle. It is a tragedy, though, for Japan's Coast Guard. Why the Coast Guard's much smaller Dash 8 aircraft was on the same runway as the jumbo jet still isn't clear. 5 of the 6 crew members were killed. Only the pilots survived. The crew was going to be flying aid to the western part of Japan that had been hit by earthquakes on New Year's Day. Investigators with the Transportation Safety Board here say they will consider everything from mechanical issues to miscommunication to human error. NBC News has learned that they have recovered the flight and voice recorders from one of the aircraft, but they're still looking for the black boxes from the other plane.
All right, Janice Mackey-Frayer, thank you so much.
Now let's get to the southern border, where the Biden administration says border agents are seeing an improvement in the record number of migrant crossings from last month.
Senior administration officials say 4 ports of entry that were closed last month due to the surge in migrants are now set to reopen on Thursday. It comes as the Biden administration is locked in a legal battle with Texas Governor Greg Abbott over the use of razor wire at the borders. And lead Senate negotiators are now back at work trying to hammer out a deal on funding for the U.S. border. President Biden was asked about issues at the border last night as he was exiting Marine One on the White House lawn.
Southern border, are you going to do anything about it? The record number of migrants.
NBC News Homeland Security correspondent Julia Ainsley, as well as NBC News senior White House correspondent Gabe Gutierrez, join us now. Good morning to both of you. Julia, I'll begin with you. And just a reminder here, U.S. Customs and Border Protection had said December was a record-setting month. Agents encountered more than 300,000 migrants at the border. So tell us, what is this change we're seeing, this improvement?
Yeah, that's according to sources who are predicting what they saw on average in December. Those official numbers really won't come out till mid-January, which could be pretty frustrating when you want more transparency. But what they are saying, at least the senior officials at the White House are saying, is that there was a drop in migrants just at the very beginning of the year. So they are taking somewhat of a victory lap on that. They had about 500 come through the Del Rio sector in a single day, which is a huge drop. That's where Eagle Pass is, where you've seen sometimes thousands there crossing in a single day and all being amassed under a bridge as CBP has struggled to keep up. But what I'm being told this morning is that there's been a pretty significant drop just in the beginning of the year, and that at this point there are no Border Patrol sectors that are over capacity. That means that when they take people in a certain sector and have to process them, no one is past 100% of their capacity, which means they're not forced to release people more quickly than they need to, which is what has happened in the past. But I am told, don't read into that too quickly. Obviously, we're still only in the third day of the year, and they think that really these fluctuations may just continue to happen, where you could see a record-setting high followed by a steep decline in the next few days. It has to do with weather patterns, what cartels are telling migrants, depending on when they might decide to leave their hometowns. There's so many factors here, but at least they are seeing some relief right now.
So, Gabe, the Biden administration and Texas Governor Abbott are at odds over razor wire along the border, along with many other issues. Let's break this down. Abbott says he installed the wire to prevent illegal border crossings. Then when Border Patrol agents cut through some of the razor wire, Texas sued, claiming the agents trespassed, that they damaged state property. Now the Biden administration is asking the Supreme Court to get involved. So what more should we know about all this? Where does this case go from here?
Well, Joe, as you mentioned, this is another example of the Biden administration butting heads with Texas officials. And as you said, the Biden administration is now asking the Supreme Court to weigh in. This comes after a court of appeals in Louisiana sided with Texas officials. And the Biden administration continues to believe that it has the authority to cut this razor wire under federal law. The Supreme Court, again, the Biden administration now asking the Supreme Court, yet to be known whether the Supreme Court will take this case up.
Julia, this week the Biden administration is also set to open 4 ports of entry. This is at the southern border that had been shut down due to this influx that they'd seen in the last couple months. What effects have those closures had on both sides of the border? What has that meant?
You know, I've covered closures in the past just from Washington, but I wasn't able to see the real impacts till I went to Lukeville, Arizona just a few weeks ago, where they had a closure there and they didn't know when it would reopen. We talked to business leaders there, small businesses in Lukeville, Arizona, a tiny town, where they said they used to see, 100 customers a day because people were going back and forth into Mexico. That dropped to 15. They were talking about layoffs, cutting hours, having to close their businesses. People who used to be able to see family members in a 25-minute drive, there would now be a 7-hour drive just to get around to the next closure. These have huge impacts on economies, both on the U.S. and Mexico side, because a lot of these people are used to going back and forth. There are children who live in Mexico and go to school in the United States if they have dual citizenship. It's really a huge impact to those communities. Just to see those ports reopen is a big victory for those communities who have really been fighting this for a long time. And we've seen the Arizona governor weigh in on this for a while, asking President Biden to do more to secure the border so that they could reopen this port of entry in a quick fashion. And I'm sure they're relieved to see it open now.
Gabe, let's talk about what's happening where you are in Washington. 3 lead Senate negotiators met yesterday with Homeland Security Secretary Mayorkas. In-person border discussions happening for the first time since they left for the holidays. So where do things stand with all that this morning?
Well, Joe, senior administration officials aren't giving many details on those negotiations, only to say that they continued over the winter break and there was some progress. But as you said, those Senate negotiators met yesterday for the first time with Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas for about 2 hours. The White House this morning coming out with a blistering statement, though, saying that House Republicans are essentially blocking this supplemental funding request. And they say that it was the president that put forward this supplemental funding request, acknowledging that more needs to be done at the border, but that it is Republicans that are standing in the way. Meanwhile, Joe, today, dozens of House Republicans, about 60 of them, are going to be touring down at the border, down in Eagle Pass. Joe?
Gabe and Julia, thank you both very much. Well, this morning, New Jersey Senator Bob Menendez is facing new allegations of accepting bribes in order to aid Qatar's government. A federal grand jury filed a second superseding indictment on Tuesday. It alleges Menendez made positive statements about Qatar to help a New Jersey developer get a multi-million-dollar investment from a company tied to Qatar's government. In exchange, prosecutors say Menendez allegedly received cash, gold bars, Formula One tickets for a relative, and an offer of a designer watch. Menendez has pleaded not guilty in the case and denied all prior allegations of wrongdoing. His attorney released this statement saying the government's new allegations stink of desperation. Despite what they've touted in press releases, the government does not have the proof to back up any of the old or new allegations against Senator Menendez. They are turning this into a persecution, not a prosecution. These latest charges are wrapped into the existing charges against Menendez, alleging he accepted hundreds of thousands of dollars in payoffs to benefit the Egyptian government.
Harvard University is looking for a new president this morning after Claudine Gay resigned. She faced a wave of criticism after testifying in Congress about anti-Semitism on college campuses. She was also facing growing accusations of plagiarism. Here's NBC News correspondent Erin McLaughlin.
Embattled Harvard President Claudine Gay stepping down, abruptly ending her turbulent 6-month tenure as the institution's first black president, the shortest term of anyone in that position. In a letter to the Harvard community, Gay writing, "It has become clear that it is in the best interest of Harvard for me to resign, and that it has been distressing to have doubt cast on my commitments to confronting hate and to upholding scholarly rigor, two bedrock values that are fundamental to who I am, and frightening to be subjected to personal attacks and threats fueled by racial animus."
Anti-Semitic rhetoric, when it crosses into conduct that amounts to bullying.
Calls for Gay's resignation followed backlash to this response at last month's congressional hearing, when Republican Elise Stefanik pressed her about anti-Semitism on college campuses.
Does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Harvard's rules of bullying and harassment, yes or no?
It can be, depending on the context.
It does not depend on the context. The answer is yes.
Pressure grew in the following weeks, with Gay facing multiple allegations of plagiarism in her academic work. Harvard initially standing by Gay, but the board accepting her resignation, saying she had acknowledged missteps, but also faced deeply personal and sustained attacks. Stefanik claiming credit, saying this is just the beginning of what will be the greatest scandal of any college or university in history. Gay's resignation leaving the campus divided.
I'm glad that, it seems like we're moving in a direction where Harvard might begin to repair its public image.
I was flabbergasted. I was more than surprised. I was shocked. I don't think she was really given a chance from the start.
Gay is not the first university president to resign in the wake of that congressional testimony. You may recall in the days following the testimony, the president of the University of Pennsylvania resigned, and Congress continues to investigate all of this. Meanwhile, Harvard did announce an interim president, Alan Garber, while they say Gay will remain on as a faculty member. Back to you.
All right, Erin McLaughlin, thank you so much. Fears are growing this morning that the Middle East conflict could broaden. That's because a senior Hamas official was killed in a drone attack on the Lebanese capital, Beirut.
Lebanese and Palestinian officials have accused Israel of carrying out the attack. Israel has neither confirmed nor denied responsibility, but a senior Israeli lawmaker praised the IDF and Israeli security forces for, quote, killing the Hamas official in a post on X. The militant group Hezbollah has vowed retaliation, but the UN is calling on all sides to de-escalate.
The developments are extremely worrying, and I think this just really highlights what the Secretary General had just said about the dangers of the spillover of this conflict in the wider region. We are calling for maximum restraint from all parties. We don't want any rash actions that could trigger further violence.
NBC News foreign correspondent Matt Bradley joins us now from the occupied West Bank. So, Matt, walk us through what happened in Beirut yesterday. Who was this Hamas official who was killed, and what are all the sides saying about it right now?
Well, it sounds like from eyewitnesses that it looked as though it was some sort of explosion, and then everybody kind of seemed to settle on the fact that it was, in fact, a drone attack. And that's what all the officials and everybody in Lebanon now is saying, that it was a drone that struck what sounded like a car in the neighborhood of Dahia. Now, this is a Hezbollah stronghold. It has a Hamas office in it, which is I visited a couple of months ago. And, you know, this is a place, again, where we're seeing the bridge between Hamas and Hezbollah, two Iran-backed militant groups, both very opposed to Israel. And now it looks as though there were at least 6 people killed in addition to Salah al-Aruri. He's the deputy, second in command of Hamas. And what makes this so significant is that Salah al-Aruri wasn't just a senior official. He was also kind of the connective tissue, the bridge between Hamas and Hezbollah. He was the man who essentially sort of mended their ties after a lot of the uproar in the Arab Spring divided a lot of these groups and sent them off in different directions. He was the man who mended the ties between Iran, Hamas, Hezbollah, and other groups. So the fact that he is now dead, and the fact that the Israelis, if it was in fact the Israelis, reached across borders to assassinate him in the capital of a neighboring country, that alone could instigate more violence and cause this anger and rage right here in the West Bank and other places throughout the Arab world to spill over and potentially engulf the entire region in war.
Matt, what's been the reaction to this attack where you are, but also globally? We understand France has been in contact with Israel on this as well, right?
Yes, we've been hearing that France has been in contact. I mean, the Israelis have been in contact with a lot of Western countries, not necessarily on the official level, but this has been ongoing since October 7th. Now, what I'm seeing here in Ramallah in the West Bank, and this is kind of the unofficial or interim capital of the Palestinians in the West Bank, there was a gathering here, about a couple hundred people, and they're still sort of gathering here. In this central square. This is a day of rage, and we've seen this quite a bit. There's been a general strike that was called by all Palestinian factions, protests throughout the Arab world. But for now, this looks somewhat muted compared to the scale of that assassination attempt. But I can tell you that everybody here is waiting to hear from one man, Hassan Nasrallah. He's the head of Hezbollah in Lebanon. Now, I just mentioned it's confusing. Hezbollah and Hamas. This Hamas official that was assassinated, he was essentially on Hezbollah territory in Lebanon. Hezbollah has been fighting against the Israelis back and forth ever since October 7th. There's been quite a bit of violence and quite a bit of Hezbollah fighters and some Israeli soldiers have been killed. But both sides have stepped back, refrained from going into a full-fledged war with each other. Now, it depends on what Hassan Nasrallah is going to say tonight. He's been kind of quiet for the past several months. But if he decides that he is going to enter this war in a full-throated way, that would be a bad, bad thing for the entire region, because it wouldn't just necessarily bring in Lebanon and Israel. It could also bring in Iran and the United States, which now has naval assets parked throughout the entire region. So really, the entire region is on tenterhooks waiting to hear what this man has to say tonight. Guys.
And Matt, amid all this, Israel still carrying out its aerial and ground assault on Gaza. What is the latest there?
Yeah, I mean, what we're seeing is more of the same. There's been calls here among the protesters that I've been talking to once again for a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip, but we're continuing to see Israel pummeling targets within the Gaza Strip. Some 85% of all of the people in the Gaza Strip have been displaced from their homes. Where they're going, it's almost impossible because they're still hemmed in by this Israeli and Egyptian blockade, which has been in place for more than the past decade. We're also seeing now the death toll continuing to rise to horrifying levels. It was just yesterday that we saw the death toll in the Gaza Strip exceeding 22,000 people ever since October 7th. That is set to rise as Israel continues to attack. But the Israelis have said that Hamas, even as recently as New Year's Eve, have been able to fire rockets at Israel despite the massive military operation that the Israelis are launching in the Gaza Strip. So the fighting is still ongoing. It is still fierce. Guys.
All right, Matt Bradley. Matt, thank you so much.
Let's get you a check of your morning news weather now. The Gulf Coast is bracing for rain this morning.
Yeah, meteorologist Angie Lastman's tracking the forecast. Angie, good morning.
Hey, good morning, guys. We've got rain today. We've got rain in the future for the Gulf Coast. So some periods of really heavy rain on tap just as we get out the door this morning. You can see places like Louisiana into Mississippi, Alabama, and the panhandle of Florida already dealing with some rain this morning. Texas finally drying out. The good news is this batch of rain is going to move out pretty quick. We're going to see this scoot right along that Gulf Coast and bring a little bit of rain to folks across the southeast, too, by later this afternoon and into the evening hours. Before you know it, though, this system is long gone, and we'll see some drier conditions for the time being for folks in that region as we get into tomorrow. Meanwhile, out west, we've got plenty of winter alerts. What you see in white are the winter weather advisories. What you see in pink is the winter storm warnings. They stretch from the Great Basin all the way out into portions of the Sierra range, and that's where we're going to see the potential for more snow today as that Pacific storm that we were tracking yesterday continues to work a little farther inland. Here's the deal through your day today. The rain, the snow, they spread a little farther to the east. They do include parts of the southwest. Places like Arizona will see rain. A little farther north, you'll start to see the snow, and that stretches all the way up into Nevada through the day today. Most of that rain will start to taper off for folks right along the west coast. But as we get into tomorrow, or as we get into Thursday, we're going to continue to see this system moving to the east. The showers and storms will push through Texas, not looking at a great chance of severe weather. It's more going to be that kind of pesky rain with the potential for some snow for parts of the southern Rockies. As we get into Friday, rounding out the work week, we start to tap into some of this moisture from the Gulf as the system works a little close, or right along that coastline of the Gulf as we get into your Friday and round out our work week. You can see the rain across portions of the south, and we'll likely see the potential for flooding with the second batch of rain for folks there. And then by the time the weekend rolls around, the mid-Atlantic up into the northeast could see the potential for some snow, some rain, and kind of a wintry mix. Now, Sunday, that'll move a little farther to the north, and it'll move offshore. The I-95 corridor looks like we could see anywhere from rain to sleet to snow, and we'll also see the potential for some wind. It really depends on the exact track of this system. We still have a little bit of a disagreement with models, so we're going to watch that closely over the next couple of days to see kind of right where that rain-snow line sets up. But as of right now, this is your snowfall forecast for Friday to Sunday. People have been harassing me for snow totals, but an accumulation forecasted. But here's what we've got right now. If you live in places like Harrisburg, Scranton to Boston, we could see some moderate rain. Right now, it does look like we'll pick up some snow for potentially the I-95 corridor, places that have really seen a drought of snow in some spots for over 2 years. Here's what we're dealing with. A chance for more than an inch of snow this weekend. 70% for New York, 90% for Hartford, 80% for Boston, Washington, D.C. coming in at 60%. This is how long it's been since the last day of an inch of snow. So the last calendar day that we had an inch of snow in Central Park was February 13th, 2022 in New York. So 689 days ago, more than 700 days in Washington, D.C., Richmond, more than 700 days, Baltimore, too. It's just really been impressive, guys, how long it's been since we've had some snow. And it could come to an end this weekend. But again, the track is going to be so important where it sets up. We could see a little bit of a rainier kind of forecast if it's a little farther to the north. But either way, if you live west of the city, if you live in portions of western Pennsylvania, you'll probably see some good snow.
Stop harassing Angie.
Yeah, please.
Don't harass
Again,
her.
it wasn't me.
Give me a break. I'm not Mother Nature. It was Savannah. It wasn't. No, it wasn't.
All right,
thanks a lot, Angie. See you in a bit. Coming up, cyber kidnapping. A Chinese exchange student found in the freezing mountains of Utah. How a group of alleged virtual kidnappers forced the teen to essentially orchestrate his own disappearance.
But first, an appeals court rules that Texas can ban emergency abortions despite federal guidance. We're going to dig into the fallout next.
Welcome back. A federal appeals court has ruled that Texas can ban emergency abortions. This decision affirms a lower court ruling that sided with the Texas Attorney General, arguing that the Biden administration's federal guidance allowing women access to abortion in emergencies was overstepping its authority.
In his ruling, the judge said, quote, the Texas plaintiff's argument that medical treatment is historically subject to police power of the states, not to be superseded unless that was the clear and manifest purpose of Congress, is convincing.
NBC News Now legal analyst Angela Sanadella joins us now to discuss this. Hey, Angela, good morning. So let's take a step back and help us better understand, because back in 2022, the Department of Health and Human Services said that medical providers should provide abortions in emergency in accordance with a 1986 federal law. So take us all the way back to that and then explain to us, is that no longer the case now in Texas?
Yes, that's exactly right. But to be clear, this is really a fight between the Biden administration and Texas. Both parties here are saying that EMTALA, this federal statute that was passed in 1986, is acceptable. And that statute required emergency providers to provide emergency treatment to any patients who came in through their doors, life-saving procedures. Now, what the Biden administration did in 2022, 2 weeks after the Dobbs decision, is they provided guidance saying that if there was ever a conflict between their definition of an emergency and a state's definition of an emergency, then the Biden administration's definition would supersede. So that is where the Texas appeals court took issue. They said this is not fair. Our definition of an emergency should be what is paramount here in this case.
So, Angela, we all remember that headline-making case last month. The pregnant woman requested an emergency court order so she could get an abortion because her fetus had a fatal diagnosis. Ultimately, the Texas Supreme Court denied that request. So what does all this mean for women who are seeking an abortion because their lives are at risk?
So based on the total lack of clarity in a state like Texas over what is precisely an appropriate life-saving emergency measure, it appears that the guidance within those state boundaries is really to travel out of state, which is not feasible, I understand. But bigger picture, I would say, for women in a state like Texas is that you no longer have a backstop. First, there was the Constitution that was taken away, and then there was the Biden administration that's also taken away. So all that you have is your state. So your vote matters more than ever, no matter which way you believe. Joe.
Angela, this is the latest development in several legal battles between Texas and the Biden administration. Does this decision tell us anything about how other cases here could go?
It's certainly possible. I think the biggest case right now is one that's in front of the Texas Supreme Court that hopefully allows for a clear definition. We have dozens of plaintiffs here seeking a definition of what is acceptable to protect the woman's life. What does that mean? Because right now, Texas law and EMTALA, the statute at play, ironically say almost the same thing, which is that in an emergency situation, abortions are acceptable. But the problem in Texas is that the criminal penalties that are placed upon doctors are so huge, up to life in prison, that doctors are not willing to even meet what they might deem is the emergency life-saving standard here. So I would say that this Texas Supreme Court decision needs to define better what is appropriate for doctors.
Angela Sanandela, as always, thank you very much.
A foreign exchange student is safe this morning after he was targeted in a bizarre cyber kidnapping scheme in Utah. NBC News correspondent Liz Kreutz tells us what happened.
He was cold, scared, and relieved when we found him.
Riverdale police say 17-year-old Kai Zhuang was reported missing by his high school outside Salt Lake City on Thursday. His family in China said they had received a photograph of their son indicating he was abducted and that they had sent roughly $80,000 to bank accounts in China as a ransom. Authorities began a days-long search assisted by the FBI and the U.S. Embassy in China, finally finding him in this wooded area New Year's Eve morning with little food and no heat.
How is the family doing right now?
Absolutely relieved. They were terrified, believing their son was being held captive and being harmed.
Police believe Kai's virtual kidnappers are in China and had been manipulating him for weeks, threatening to hurt his family. As part of the disturbing scam, they say victims like Kai are ordered to isolate, then monitored via FaceTime or Skype, and coerced into taking photos of themselves to make it appear they are being held captive.
What can people do to keep themselves and their kids safe?
Have a good communication plan, have a planned time to talk, and then having code words. A code word that means you're under duress or something's not right.
And officials say foreign exchange students are often targets of these cyber kidnapping scams. Authorities say if you or your family are ever threatened, go right to police, don't send money, and stop all contact with suspects. Back to you.
All right, Liz Kreutz, thank you.
Wow. Well, now to international headlines, starting with the latest on the war in Ukraine.
NBC News foreign correspondent Claudio Lavanga joined us from Rome with that and other world headlines. Claudio, good morning.
Joe, Savannah, good morning. That's right. Russian officials say they downed dozens of missiles before they could reach the border town of Belgorod, where 25 people were killed and about 100 more were injured in an attack on Saturday. Now, a missile was also shot down over the Russian-occupied city of Sevastopol in Crimea. The strikes follow Russia's largest aerial bombardment of Ukraine yet. Ukraine's President Zelensky stated 300 missiles and 200 drones were launched at Ukraine's largest cities over 5 days. Now to Somalia, where President Hassan Sheikh Mahmoud addressed Parliament regarding a port deal between Ethiopia and the breakaway Somali region of Somaliland. The deal, which could give Ethiopia access to the Gulf of Aden, is being called a clear violation of Somalia's sovereignty. The Somali government recalled its ambassador in Ethiopia for consultation in response. Somalia's government officials state the deal was null and void with no legal bias and are committed to defending their land by any means possible. Finally, as the world anticipates the Olympics in Paris this summer, the International Olympic Committee has issued new guidelines on transgender athletes. The committee announced it will drop policies that require competing athletes to undergo medically necessary procedures or treatments. It will also no longer require athletes to sustain hormone level modifications to compete. The new framework hopes to enforce that everyone, irrespective of their gender identity or sex variations, can practice sport in a safe and harassment-free environment. Back to you guys.
All right, Claudio, thank you so much. Well, coming up, IV drips have been a growing trend on the health scene.
But experts say some of the facilities that dispense them are operating with little oversight, and that can lead to big problems for patients. That story just ahead. We are back with our weekly medical checkup, and we have an exciting update on the world's first partial heart transplant.
Yeah, very cool. Plus, we are taking a closer look at why low-carb diets could help reduce weight gain in the long run. NBC News medical contributor Dr. Kavita Patel joins us now to break down these headlines and more. Dr. Patel, good morning. Thanks very much for joining us. So, Duke Health, they performed what is believed to be the world's first partial heart transplant. Over a year later, some results are in. Apparently, it was a success. What were researchers looking for? Tell us about this.
Yeah, Joe, Savannah, remember this date, remember this case, because it's the tale of Owen, who was born with a congenital heart defect called truncus arteriosus. Normally, we have two arteries that come out of two parts of our heart. He was only born with one. At 17 days of life a year ago, he received what was considered to be, and still is, the first partial heart transplant, where he was able to get kind of healthy arteries and healthy valves from another donor, another baby, which is completely unusual because normally you have to use artificial heart valves, and then the baby has to get more surgeries over their lifetime because as they grow, those heart valves are artificial, they don't grow with them. In Owen's case, a year later, not only are those arteries and valves still growing, he's on less medications, Joe and Savannah, than a normal heart transplant recipient. He went from 17 medications a year ago to 2, including a baby aspirin. So this is literally a modern medical miracle. It also offers hope to future babies who need heart transplants. 20% of them have no chance of getting them and unfortunately don't have life. So this is less doctor's orders and less just more of a let's take a moment to see that there is a true gift of life in both giving and receiving, because this came from what we call a domino transplant, a baby who needed a complete heart, but had healthy valves and a healthy artery, was able to give that to baby Owen. So this is incredible, offers light at an end of a tunnel. Remember this day.
That is absolutely extraordinary. Thank you for that update and the importance of just the research and the money we spend on heart health. All right, let's talk about New Year's resolutions. We're trying these good habits. I think I've already failed. One thing that we think of is a low-carb diet, which can help slow weight gain over time, but they're not easy because carbs are good. So what are the best strategies for a low-carb diet, and are there just certain carbs you just got to stay away from totally?
I'm telling you, I'm a carb lover, genetically programmed to love carbs. And here's the good news. Researchers looked at over 120,000 patients. They looked at them over years and tried to really understand what kind of carbs do you need to eat to keep weight down and to keep that weight off, losing weight and keeping it off, the long game. And it's really getting high quality carbs in and swapping out anything that's kind of white or highly processed. Remember, we've talked about looking at ingredients before. If you can't even interpret what the ingredients are on the back of something, probably overly processed and you need to put it away. swap it out for something with a whole grain, things like oatmeals, things like whole grain pasta, whole grain breads. So this does not mean, good news, you don't need to avoid bread, you don't need to avoid popcorn, but avoid putting kind of all those processed chemicals on the popcorn and get that healthy bread. Also of note was that these were people who had lower kind of animal diet content. So we probably heard about like whole food, whole plant diets. This means that we probably should be switching out some of the animal meats and things that we eat with plant proteins, and those are beans, nuts, and soy. So the doctor's orders here: prioritize the high quality carbs and play the long game. So don't deny yourself and do like a low extreme carb diet for 30 days. Think about swaps over time.
All right, that's good advice there. Well, a special report from the International Agency for Research on Cancer finds that limiting alcohol can cut your risk of certain cancers, also something a lot of us are trying to do this month in particular. Yeah. Walk us through what types of cancer are mentioned and how much can it really make a difference?
Incredible. And we'll do this briefly because there's so much here to unpack, but we know that drinking is associated with lots of different kinds of cancers, but we've never looked at the reverse. If you stop drinking, does it reduce your risk of cancers? And what they found in researchers over time is they found that it was specific certain kinds of cancers: oral cancers, cancers of the throat, and esophageal cancer. The esophagus is that pipe that connects your mouth to your stomach, and that those were the specific cancers where they found a difference if you actually slow down or reverse and stop your drinking completely. For oral cancer, if you stop drinking for at least 10 to 19 years, you can reduce your relative risk of 55%. Those are big numbers. Wow. For esophageal cancer, for that tube, it's a 65% relative risk reduction if you stop drinking for 15 years or more. The doctor's orders are clear. It's January, dryuary, start with the dry month. Now is as good a time as any. You can even just reduce that amount in the month of January, then work in dry days and weeks over time. But pretty big impacts and important studies that we covered.
Amazing numbers.
Yeah.
All right. Dr. Patel, thank you so much. Appreciate your time this morning.
Well, in other health news, there's growing concern over the use of IV drips at medical spas.
Experts say that these facilities can operate with very little oversight, leading to serious consequences for patients. NBC News medical reporter Erica Edwards joins us now with more on this. So, Erica, what are some of the dangers with IV drips? Is there any regulation for these procedures?
Yeah, good morning. So while many med spas do operate safely, there is growing concern that some of these places are operating with unlicensed workers using unapproved products in unsanitary conditions. And doctors I spoke with say that they are seeing an increasing number of bacterial infections among people who have visited one of these med spas. And usually that can happen if equipment is not sterilized properly or if folks are using unapproved products. Now, med spas are regulated by the states with varying rules. There are no federal standards for these facilities nationwide. Guys?
Yeah, I mean, so the FDA, the CDC, what do they say about this?
So the FDA has issued 2 alerts recently warning consumers about the potential for health risks, especially among workers who have never been trained properly to administer an IV or an injection, or who are using unapproved products that they bought off the internet. Usually those compounds are meant to dissolve fat, and those are unapproved. Most of those are unapproved.
Erica, I know you spoke to several patients about their procedures that had gone wrong. What did you learn?
Yeah, I really want to highlight one woman in California who went in to get injections, a combination of vitamins B12, vitamin C, and one of those fat-dissolving compounds. She received hundreds of shots all over her body. Within 24 hours, every injection site just erupted into a raging infection. She said like her whole body felt like it was on fire. It was an aggressive, drug-resistant bacterial infection that, guys, nearly 3 years later, she is still battling with IV antibiotics.
Ooh, so I mean, this is going to get a lot of people's attention, certainly. What can you do to make sure you do have a safe experience if you're visiting a medical spa? What are the questions you should be asking before you even consider getting an IV like this?
Well, seems like we might have lost Erica Edwards. We will try to get that answer for you.
But there is an article right now on NBCNews.com that
correct.
offers more information about this. So you can
the Erica contributor reporting there for exactly, so you can find out some of that information. Our thanks to Erica for that. Well, coming up, the new year is here, but for many of us, the stresses of 2023 have carried over to 2024.
From the upcoming election to the war between Israel and Hamas, we're going to go one-on-one with an expert to discuss how you can handle dealing with some of these tough topics. Welcome back. So you might have spent the holidays having some difficult conversations, maybe ones you didn't want to have with friends and loved ones.
Yeah, there's a lot going on in the world. Well, if you did, you are not alone. In fact, new polling shows more Americans are struggling to navigate sensitive discussions about current events.
So let's bring in a friend of the show, Sophie Barron, for more on this. She's the founder and CEO of The Conversationalist. Good to have you with us. So I'm going to look at a poll here, Yahoo News poll. 72% of Americans believe the political climate has worsened over the last decade. I don't know who those other 28% are who think it's okay, but talk about why this is and what are some of the challenges people have when they are having these conversations over the holidays, over the dinner table.
Thank you both for having me. I don't think that data comes as a surprise for anyone.
Right.
But I think there are a handful of reasons as to why we've gotten to where we are. I personally believe that if anything, the issue of the echo chamber has exacerbated our division, where we only find ourselves in environments where we reaffirm our own ideologies and we spend a majority of our time on social media only hearing the loudest voices in the room. And these factors all together really point to why Americans are feeling so burnt out and feeling the divide more than ever.
So you have something specific that you call the SUN method that you came up with to try to kind of help us navigate these conversations. Tell us what that is.
The SUN philosophy is a tool that I've built to help anyone navigate hard conversations in their own lives. SUN is an acronym that stands for see, understand, and need. And when you can identify someone's point of view, see them for who they are, understand why they possess that point of view, and identify what you both need to go do, you're able to forge a bridge between you and the other person in that conversation, which stands for common ground. And I recently was able to use the SUN philosophy when I visited both the March for Gaza at the UN and the March for Israel in DC. And every person I spoke to, no matter where they stood on the issue, they were each able to identify the other side's point of view. They could understand something about that other side, even if they don't agree, and identify what they needed to move forward in that conversation. And I think that's why it's so important that we really are honest with one another about what we need, and that tool can help anyone navigate that conversation.
And go in with the right mindset instead of a mindset of just wanting to have conflict or battle with someone as well. Oftentimes we're discussing things and maybe disagreeing with people across generations. So do you have some tips if you're talking about some of these issues with someone who's much older than you or much younger than you?
Absolutely. I think no matter where you stand, what generation you're a part of, there are a lot of misconceptions about each other. And the best way to avoid these misconceptions is to stop assuming things about someone who has a different set of lived experiences. And something I found to be extremely helpful is to add context. If you're asking someone a question or you want to have a conversation with a specific intent, identify that. Let someone off of their guard and walk them through why you're curious about something. And just like the SUN philosophy, keep that tool in your back pocket, because at the end of the day, when it's a freezing cold day outside, you're much more likely to stay indoors, nestled up, not wanting to have these conversations. But when the sun is shining, we're much more likely to come outside and come closer together. So I think no matter what generation you're a part of, we could all use a little bit of sun.
How important is it to keep in mind in some of these conversations that you might be having them, as we mentioned earlier, with family, with somebody who, you know, is going to be in your life, and that at the end of the day, hopefully you love each other? How do you kind of keep that in the forefront?
I've had my fair share of tough conversations, especially with my own family, around anything from politics to pop culture. And I think it's important to be your best advocate. Set the right boundaries for yourself. Know when you need to bow out of a conversation, and know why you're having it in the first place. Because if you want to maintain or preserve that relationship, it's a long game. And I think so often what we get wrong is that we think conversations are sprints. We need to get everything out in the open and end it as quickly as possible. But I think where we get it wrong is we're not actually listening and being present and actually receiving information. And I think the most powerful thing you can do, especially with family members, is listen to someone with the same passion you feel for being heard.
All right. Next year, we're going to have you on December 20th. By the way, to talk about this again before the holiday.
I love what you just said at the end.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Good having you on.
It's always great to see you. Thank you very much. Well, now let's get to some financial headlines for you this morning. We've got quite the update on that potential TikTok ban in Montana.
CNBC's Silvana Henao has that and other money news. Silvana, good morning.
Joe, Savannah, good morning to you. Yes, so Montana is appealing a decision by a federal judge to block the state from barring anyone from using TikTok. Montana's ban had been set to take effect January 1st, but the judge granted a temporary injunction in November, saying the law oversteps the state's power and violates the Constitution. TikTok users in Montana also filed a lawsuit last year to block the ban approved by state lawmakers who cited concerns about the personal data of users and potential spying by China. TikTok's parent company ByteDance is based in China. Demand for mortgage applications dropped during the final week of 2023. Despite the sharp decline in rates over the past month, the Mortgage Bankers Association says total volume fell more than 9%, even when you include adjustments for the holidays. The average rate on a 30-year fixed loan ending the year at 6.76%. That is well below the 8% high in mid-October. Home buyers are still contending with very little supply on the market and home prices that are still rising. Home prices in Manhattan have risen for the first time in more than a year as surging sales of high-end apartments fueled the market, and lower mortgage rates set the stage for a broader recovery in 2024. Reports from real estate firms Miller Samuel and Douglas Elliman show homes sold for average of $1.16 million in the fourth quarter. That's up 5% from the previous year. While the overall number of sales fell, those at or above $5 million jumped. In a period when mortgage rates were rising toward 8%, more than 2/3 of buyers in Manhattan paid cash. Manhattan is the nation's largest apartment market, guys.
$5 million, that's what, a large studio in Manhattan is?
Right.
I don't bother to look.
Oh my gosh.
Savannah, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Coming up, it is the Stanley Cup. You don't need to be a hockey player to get your hands on.
But you might not be able to get your hands on one. Up next, we'll explain how a humble tumbler became the must-have item for both kids and adults. Welcome back. We're going to end this hour with a look at the Stanley Cup a lot of people may have gotten for Christmas. Not the Stanley Cup you get for winning the National Hockey League, but the tumbler made by a company more than 100 years old.
And now gaining fame for making one of the most sought-after mugs in the country. NBC News correspondent Stephen Romo has the story.
Drawing screams of excitement and tears of joy. This year's hottest status symbol and most coveted holiday gift is the Stanley Tumbler. The 40-ounce quencher, a favorite for preteens and adults alike, comes in a variety of colors and costs $45. Fans lining up for new releases and limited edition items like these Valentine's Day bottles. It's reminding some of the Beanie Baby craze or a classic Black Friday stampede. Adding to the legend, viral videos of the cup's indestructibility, like this one that survived a car fire. Stanley even going as far as to give the owner a new car. In 3 years, the quencher taking the company's annual sales from $73 million to $750 million, a massive bump for a brand that's been around for more than a century. But how did Stanley Cups go from thermoses for construction workers to a 13-year-old's dream gift? At first, the quencher was a flop. It wasn't until a group of working moms running the popular blog The Buy Guide took a liking to it in 2017.
They had a keen eye for what colors might work for their audience, and they were right.
Stanley's president, Terrence Riley, spoke to our colleagues at CNBC. Under his direction, Stanley moved into the world of pastels.
So it was a slow build over many months, and then you could see that the waiting lists began to grow.
Like so many other items, there's often a status water bottle, as funny as that might sound.
It's not the first water bottle to reach cult status. Swell, Nalgene, and Hydro Flasks, all with their own moments in the spotlight.
There are definitely important product quality merits, but I think more than anything, the velocity and quantity at which folks are posting about the product online is creating a sense of urgency that really hasn't been matched by many other products out there.
Consumers going beyond buying bottles for daily use, TikTokers often showing off their collection of colors and customized tumblers.
A way for them to express themselves more so than just a way for them to carry water around to hydrate themselves at this point.
The quencher's rise putting Stanley on the radar for more consumers, and the company is looking to seize that opportunity.
So the quencher trend is certainly exciting, but we're more than just the quencher.
Stephen Romo, NBC News.
Kids are aware there are toys, right?
Joe,
action figures.
It's a great little mug.
Okay, I believe you.
I'm telling you.
It's wonderful.
Now I know what to get you for
I'm very
Christmas next
excited.
year.
Can't wait. I'm so excited.
I'm going to remind you that they were cool a year prior,
And
and that's what I'm getting you.
All right. Let's do it for this hour of Morning News Now.
Stay with us, though. The news continues right now. Good morning. Thanks for joining us. I'm Savannah Sellers.
I'm Joe Fryer. Right now on Morning News Now, we are learning more about that tragic Japan Airlines collision in Tokyo that left 5 members of the country's Coast Guard dead. Miraculously, all 379 passengers and crew on board that airliner managed to safely escape the terrifying burning fuselage. What investigators are focusing on to figure out what exactly went wrong. In the Middle East, a senior Hamas leader has been killed in Beirut. While Israel is not claiming responsibility for now, its military is on high alert for retaliation from the Iran-backed militant group Hezbollah. We're going to bring you the latest from the ground in a moment. We're also watching another Ivy League shakeup this morning. Embattled Harvard president Claudine Gay stepping down. Her decision comes on the heels of weeks of criticism surrounding her handling of anti-Semitism on the school's campus and accusations of plagiarism. Why she's choosing this moment to resign and how the Harvard community is reacting. And later in the hour, we are diving into 2024 head first, or should we say stomach first, with a closer look at some of the top diets for the new you in the new year. Spoiler alert, it does not involve like lots of sugar or candy or anything
What a
like
surprise.
that.
No carbs.
Exactly, but it'll be fun to dive into some of those things.
Definitely.
We are going to start this morning, of course, with the investigation into that fiery collision at one of Japan's busiest airports. A passenger plane burst into flames on the runway after crashing into a smaller Coast Guard aircraft.
Remarkably, all 379 people on that Japan Airlines flight managed to safely evacuate. NBC News foreign correspondent Janice Mackey-Fair is in Tokyo and joins us now with the very latest.
Investigators are poring over the crash site at Haneda Airport, which is just behind me. On-ground collisions between aircraft are very rare, so they're trying to figure out exactly what went wrong.
In the charred hull of the destroyed passenger plane, investigators are hoping to find clues to understand how a routine flight quickly became a deadly and terrifying inferno. In a statement, Japan Airlines says Flight 516 from Sapporo was cleared to land at Haneda Airport. Then footage from runway cameras showed the jet appearing to hit something, bursting into flames, and eventually skidding down the runway to a stop.
All stations, Tokyo, Taiwan. Now, Tokyo International Airport is closed. Airport is closed.
Inside the packed Airbus A350, thick smoke and panic filled the cabin. 17-year-old Anton Deeb was on board with his family and saw flames outside his window.
I finally opened the doors and everyone ran out, and then you had to jump out of the plane.
The safe evacuation of all 379 passengers and crew, with black smoke and flames billowing over the fuselage, has been hailed as remarkable, taking less than 90 seconds. I can only say it was a miracle, this passenger says. While the Japanese Coast Guard's much smaller Dash 8 aircraft was on the same runway as the jumbo jet isn't clear, 5 of 6 crew members were killed in the collision, only the pilot making it out alive. The plane, due to deliver aid to areas on Japan's west coast, devastated by the New Year's Day earthquakes that have killed at least 64 people. Rescuers still racing to save those trapped in the rubble, with aftershocks continuing to shake the region this morning.
Japan's transport safety authorities, along with a forensic team from Airbus, will consider everything from miscommunication to equipment malfunction to human error. NBC News has learned that the voice and data recorders from one of the flights has been recovered, but they're still looking for the black boxes from the other plane.
All right, Janice Mackey-Fair, thank you so much.
For more, let's bring in NBC News aviation analyst John Cox. Good to have you with us. So, I mean, it sounds like the Japanese passenger jet was cleared to land on the same runway where the Coast Guard plane was getting ready to take off. Just your reaction to that right there.
Initial reports indicate that the Japanese Coast Guard airplane did not have clearance to be on the runway. It's preliminary, and that's something the investigators are going to look at. So was there a misunderstanding of a clearance? Was there a misissuance of a clearance? All of those things are going to be evaluated. What could the Japanese airplane, what could those pilots see? What was the lighting conditions of the Coast Guard airplane? All of these questions are going to be looked at in detail by the investigators. So this is complex, and the answers will take some time to get to. It is good news to hear that they have found one set of the recorders. Those recorders are going to tell the story.
Tell us what else will actually be looked for on the scene. What are the types of things they're looking for? And also, we understand that French investigators are being called in to help here with this. Why is that?
The French investigators are going to be a part of it because the aircraft was manufactured in France. And this is typical. This is by agreement with the International Civil Aviation Organization about how aircraft accidents are evaluated. So now the French will be involved. It is also possible that the United Kingdom, because the engines were manufactured in the UK, they may be involved as well. Airbus will be involved. The Japanese airlines will be involved. So this is how we do things in aircraft accident investigation. Is you assemble a team of experts, and then as a group, you very methodically go through and evaluate each piece of evidence to compile the final report, which will take about 18 months.
Let's ask you about the thing that everyone is talking about. How did the flight crew manage to get nearly 400 passengers off the burning plane safely, quickly, even with a damaged intercom system?
It's a good design on the part of the airplane. It's excellent training on the part of the flight crew, and it's good execution on the flight crew and the passengers. When you look at the video, one thing that really struck me is everyone is quiet, they're listening, they're compliant, and no one is trying to get their belongings out of the overhead. And recognize there were only 3 exits available. And out of those 3 exits, they got everyone evacuated in about 2 minutes. And so this was an excellent, excellent performance by the crew, which indicates JAL's training is very good. But it's a good design on the airplane, so it's a combination of all of it.
Incredible. This less than 2 minutes. I mean, really. Finally, we also want to ask you, this is the type of nightmare scenario that FAA has been warning about here with American pilots, because we've seen several close calls here in the U.S. over the last year or so. What do you think about that? I mean, could this have any impact on FAA guidelines? Are we watching this here in the U.S. to see what a worst-case scenario is?
Oh, we're certainly looking to see what lessons can be learned by this tragedy. What we have seen over the last year, particularly in 2023, it were some relatively high visibility near misses where there was congestion on a runway or a runway incursion. All of those were caught, and none of those resulted in any collisions, but they were too close. So what lessons, what commonality were there between these events? Were there any of these similar to what happened in Japan? Now, what we saw, if you go back to February of 1991, we did see a ground collision in Los Angeles between a U.S. Air jet and a SkyWest Metroliner. Are there any similarities there? So all of this is something that FAA, NTSB will be looking at in conjunction with the investigation going on in Japan to help to continue to make our aviation system one of the safest in the world. Recognize in 2023, we had one of the safest years in history. So we're doing a lot of things right. We just need to continue to take the lessons learned from these kind of tragedies like what we saw in Japan.
It only takes one tragedy to raise all these questions. All right, John Cox, thanks so much for joining us this morning. We appreciate your expertise. Weather now, rain on the way for the west, well, a winter storm heading for the east.
Finally, Angie Lassman.
We're so excited for it.
Back with your morning news now weather. Hey, Angie.
Good morning, guys. Just calm down for a second. We've got a couple days till we're going to see some of this snow. And actually, the rain that you're talking about in the west and the snow in the west is going to be the same system that impacts us down the line and potentially brings us some snow for portions of the east. We'll get to that in a moment. But of course, we've got to start with what we're dealing with right now. And those are winter alerts for much of the west. We've got winter storm warnings in the bright pink that you see there, including places like Santa Fe. We've got the winter weather advisories that are up and down parts of the Great Basin and out towards portions of the California ranges as well. We're going to have difficult travel for a lot of those spots today as we pick up some additional snowfall as that system works its way to the east. You can see anywhere from 2 to 4 inches is the more the widespread amount, but where you see that brighter pink up to 8 inches and even localized amounts higher than that. Now, this is for the short term. Here's what happens over the next couple of days, though. That system works a little farther to the east today, moving inland. Yesterday, California dealt with it with some heavy rain stretching up into Washington. Now, as we get into your Thursday, we're going to start to see that heavy snow centered across portions of the southern Rockies. We'll see some rain working to portions of Texas. They've already had ample amounts of rain yesterday. Another batch of that rain is going to work through the Gulf Coast as we get into Friday, leaving the potential for some flooding concerns there. They're dealing with some heavy rain today, so some ample rain on the way just in time for the end of the week. That could lead us to some saturated grounds and likely some flooding concerns for folks there. Here's where we start to see some of that moisture being tapped into from the Gulf of Mexico as the system lifts a little farther to the north and east. The actual location and the track of the system is going to be really important, where that low sets up. All of that is going to determine where that range snow line is, and that's going to be important because is it along the I-95 corridor? Do we see places like New York and Washington, D.C. picking up on some snow? Potentially. But we could also potentially see some warmer air along the coast, and that means rain. Meanwhile, as we get into Sunday, we'll still be dealing with the snow for parts of the Northeast, especially the interior, and we'll likely still see some rain across that area. Now, here's the two different scenarios. If we see this coastline track, that means that we'll see that milder kind of ocean air that I was mentioning hug the coast. We could see water temperatures in the 50s, so it'll be a little warmer and definitely too warm to see some snow falling the closer you are to the coast. That means that some of those major cities like New York, Philly, Washington, D.C., that are just a lot of people are waiting for snow, you likely won't see the snow. But if we see that more offshore track, if it moves a little farther to the south, say 300 miles, then we're talking, which really isn't that much when we're talking weather systems, we'll see the colder air a little farther to the south, and that means New York, Philly, Washington, D.C. could see some of that heavier snow. Either way, I think if you live in portions of upstate New York, Pennsylvania, you've got some moderate snow on the way. Places like Boston could see some moderate snow. So we'll see what we have in store, guys, but we could break that streak that's almost 700 days without
Angie,
an inch
when
of
will
snow.
we know? When are you going to know?
On Friday.
Okay.
Listen, I'm giving you all the information I have. If you want me to make it up, I can.
I kept telling people in Minnesota, I'm like, no, it hasn't snowed in New York in like nearly 2 years or whatever.
Yeah.
They were all like, what? Really?
It's shocking, honestly.
So
We are due for a good, beautiful snowfall, in my opinion.
Yes.
Some people will be mad about that, but
We'll Thank you, Angie.
Thanks, Angie. Appreciate it.
Well, in the Middle East, there are renewed fears of a broader escalation in the conflict between Israel and Hamas. That's after a senior Hamas official was killed in a drone attack on the Lebanese capital, Beirut. Lebanese and Palestinian officials say Israel was behind the attack. Israel has neither confirmed nor denied responsibility. NBC News foreign correspondent Matt Bradley joins us now from the occupied West Bank with the latest. Hi, Matt. Good morning.
Hey, good morning, guys. So I'm here in Ramallah, which is sort of the interim capital for the Palestinians here in the West Bank. And just a moment ago, we saw a day of rage, and there really were only a couple hundred people out here protesting that assassination last night in Beirut that you just talked about. But there was rage throughout the entire region, because not only did, well, we don't know exactly, but, you know, the Israelis haven't acknowledged that they were behind this, but our understanding from our good team in Washington heard from two sources, it sounds like, that it was in fact the Israelis who were behind this attack. And regardless of whether the Israelis claim responsibility, all of the suspicion in the region is falling on the Israelis for committing this assassination, and not just against Hamas's number 2, Salah al-Aruri, but 6 other top militant leaders in the region, some of them belonging to Hamas's militant wing. So this was a major escalation. whether it was the Israelis or not. And it looks as though a lot of people in the region, a lot of militant groups, including Hezbollah, which dominates a major part of Lebanon, are going to be seriously considering whether or not they want to escalate this war and whether or not they want to enter into it in a full-throated way. So far, Hezbollah, ever since October 7th, has been launching attacks across the border into Israel. The Israelis have been attacking back. It's killed well more than 100 people so far, but it hasn't gone into a full-fledged war. But tonight, we're hearing from the head of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, who'll be addressing his adoring public, not just here in the Middle East, but throughout the world. And finally, this region, which is waiting on tenterhooks to see what Hezbollah will do, will get a better sense of whether Hezbollah, and that means Iran, the United States, will be entering into this fight. Guys? Today, an already volatile region braces for a potentially wider war. The assassination of a top Hamas leader left a massive blaze in Beirut. Hamas accused Israel of killing its second-in-command, Salah al-Aruri, among other leaders. Al-Aruri had a $5 million American bounty on his head. This eyewitness said it wasn't a military jet, it was a drone. It had a low sound. Israel neither confirmed nor denied responsibility for the attack.
Whoever did this strike was very surgical and went for a Hamas target because Israel is at war. Whoever did this has a gripe with Hamas.
Al-Aruri was one of the founding members of Hamas's military wing and a key liaison with other countries and militant groups. He's praised Hamas's October 7th terror attack against Israel. In Al-Aruri's birthplace of Ramallah, the anger started boiling last night. Killing Salah al-Aruri in the center of Beirut will never put an end to our struggle to achieve our goals, this man tells me. But many here worry the rage could spread beyond these borders. Israel's military spokesman saying we're on high readiness for any scenario. Hezbollah and Israel have exchanged fire over Lebanon's southern border for months. They've stopped short of an all-out war, but last night's attack, right in a Hezbollah stronghold, could represent an escalation of the conflict. Hezbollah's leader has pledged a response to any assassinations in Lebanon. Now, what we're seeing right here, again, we're talking about rage throughout the entire Middle East, whether or not it escalates into a region-wide war. That's the big question that everybody hopes is going to be settled with Hassan Nasrallah's speech this evening. Guys?
All right, Matt Bradley, thank you very much.
Let's bring in Aaron David Miller. He is a senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Thank you so much for joining us. First of all, your reaction to this attack that killed a senior Hamas official in Lebanon. What's going to be the impact of this? Are you concerned this could make the conflict widen even further?
I mean, look, from the beginning, the war, we're now into the third month of this Israel-Hamas war, and the prospects for escalation along the Israeli-Lebanese border has always been there. But for the last 9-10 weeks, the reality is neither Iran nor Hezbollah seems to have an interest in fundamentally escalating, which would almost certainly involve bringing the United States. That it deployed 2 carrier strike groups, one in the Eastern Med, with over 200 strike aircraft. I still think, even in the wake of the alleged Israeli strike against Salah al-Aruri, that the risk of aversion on the part of Iran and Hezbollah pertains. The reality is a major conflict, should it erupt, will make what is happening in Gaza seem small by comparison. It raises the real prospects of American involvement, American strikes against pro-Iranian militias in Iraq and in Syria, perhaps even in Lebanon, a major war between Israel and Hezbollah, which could kill literally thousands of Lebanese and hundreds more of Israelis, even as the Israelis pursue their efforts to eradicate or at least degrade Hamas's military assets in Gaza. So I think that we're not on the verge of what I would call a major escalation.
If you don't mind, I'd like to ask you about what seems to be growing friction between the U.S. and Israel's far-right government. Yesterday, the State Department released a statement condemning recent comments made by 2 senior Israeli ministers calling for the resettlement of Palestinians living in Gaza to someplace else. The U.S. said, you could see on your screen here, that was, quote, inflammatory and irresponsible. They said they should stop immediately. We know the U.S. advocates for a 2-state solution, but at this point, what do you think is realistic when you hear comments like that from Israeli government ministers?
Well, first of all, this is the most extreme right-wing, supremacist, homophobic government in the history of the state of Israel. These two ministers, Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich, are pursuing policies both toward Israeli Arabs, Palestinian citizens of Israel, and toward the West Bank, which are provocative and only likely to escalate a situation which is already incredibly volatile. I really don't think that U.S. comments, words, rhetoric against these two ministers, even by name, which is a little unusual, represents any sort of major breach in the U.S.-Israeli relationship. The reality right now is the Biden administration is not looking for a major or public sustained confrontation with Benjamin Netanyahu. We'll see by the end of January whether or not what the administration is really interested in, which is a fundamental change in Israel's tempo, character of Israeli military operations in Gaza, takes hold in an effort to allow what is badly needed, not a dribble, but a surge of humanitarian assistance into Gaza, particularly into southern Gaza. That I think is what the administration wants. I suspect if that does not happen, you may well see serious tensions. But I have a feeling the Israelis are already adjusting to the reality that they're going to have to change the way they operate, at least in southern Gaza, and particularly, and even in the north.
All right. Aaron David Miller, thank you so much for your time this morning. We appreciate it.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Well, students at Harvard will start the spring semester under new leadership after the university's president, Claudine Gay, announced her resignation yesterday. The move comes amid growing criticism for her testimony at a congressional hearing about anti-Semitism on campus, and also amid accusations of plagiarism in her academic work. Gay is now the institution's shortest tenured leader in Harvard's nearly 400-year history. NBC News correspondent Aaron McLaughlin joins us now from Harvard with the latest on this. Hey, Aaron, good morning.
Hey, Savannah, good morning. Harvard's Claudine Gay is the university's first black president. She's also now the second Ivy League leader to resign in recent weeks amidst backlash from that heated congressional hearing, as well as allegations of plagiarism. Harvard President Claudine Gay announced she's resigning. Gay's departure comes just 6 months into a turbulent tenure at the university. Writing in a letter to the Harvard community, "This is not a decision I came to easily."
I am Claudine Gay, the president of Harvard University.
Gay says her decision comes after discussions with Harvard's top governing body about unrelenting scrutiny from critics who say she mishandled anti-Semitism on Harvard's campus, as well as plagiarism allegations in her academic work, which she has denied. Gay writing, "It has been distressing to have doubt cast on my commitments to confronting hate and to upholding scholarly rigor, two bedrock values that are fundamental to who I am." Calls for Gay's resignation growing after a congressional hearing about anti-Semitism and Islamophobia on college campuses, alongside the presidents of the University of Pennsylvania and MIT last month. This exchange with Republican Congresswoman Elise Stefanik going viral.
Is yes. And Dr. Gay, at Harvard, does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Harvard's rules of bullying and harassment? Yes or no?
It can be, depending on the context.
It does not depend on the context. The answer is yes, and this is why you should resign.
But growing pressure against the university started before that testimony. Alumni pulling back donations over the school's response to the Hamas terrorist attacks of October 7th. Harvard's governing body accepting Gay's resignation. Writing in a statement, she acknowledged missteps and has shown remarkable resilience in the face of deeply personal and sustained attacks. Both on and off campus, Tuesday's move splitting the Harvard community.
She lost the ability, at least in the perception of many students and faculty and alumni, to lead the university.
I think that there were attempts for her to force her to resign for quite some time, starting with her congressional testimony.
Harvard's governing body has named Provost Alan Garber as the interim president as they work to select a new leader. Meanwhile, Gay is expected to stay on at the university as a faculty member. Savannah.
All right. Aaron McLaughlin, thank you so much.
Former President Donald Trump is fighting to keep his name on the ballot in Maine's Republican primary on March 5th. On Tuesday, Trump's attorneys argued that Maine's Secretary of State, a Democrat, lacks the authority to remove him from the ballot. At this point, Trump is still on the primary ballot. While the courts consider the case, the Superior Court has until January 17th to make a decision. That ruling could then be appealed to higher courts.
Now to the ongoing crisis at the southern border. Federal officials say they're going to reopen several ports of entry this week after seeing a dip in illegal crossings. It comes as a group of Republican lawmakers are set to visit Eagle Pass, Texas today, a border town where migrants have recently flooded into the U.S. in record numbers. That's where NBC News correspondent Morgan Chesky is. Morgan, good morning.
Yeah, hard to believe it was just weeks ago where we witnessed thousands of migrants waiting to be processed beneath these Eagle Pass bridges. This week, at least for now, it appears to be a different story. Customs and Border Protection reporting on Monday alone in this entire sector, they only encountered 500 migrants. That dip, enough for one official to call it significant progress ahead of a major visit from lawmakers. This morning, a humanitarian crisis in a political spotlight. A record influx of migrants at the southern border, prompting a Republican delegation to see the situation here in Eagle Pass firsthand.
There has to be meaningful border solutions. It can't be window dressings.
Homeland Security officials telling NBC News federal authorities encountered nearly 300,000 migrants last month alone. The immigration issue is sure to be front and center as the 2024 primary season heats up. While on Capitol Hill, a bipartisan group of senators has been working on border security legislation. The battle to contain the problem also playing out in courtrooms nationwide. The Justice Department threatening to sue Texas over its new law, allowing state and local law enforcement to arrest and deport migrants suspected of entering the U.S. illegally. In a letter obtained by NBC News, the DOJ calling the law unconstitutional, arguing it would disrupt the federal government's operations.
Senate Bill 3 for more border wall construction.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott has sent some 95,000 migrants on chartered buses and planes to cities nationwide, often without notice.
What Texas is doing is bonkers.
New York City's Mayor Eric Adams accusing Abbott of going around a new executive order that limits when and where those buses can arrive, after the latest group of buses stopped just short of the city in Secaucus, New Jersey.
We're dealing with a bully right now, and everything is on the table that conforms with the law.
Denver's mayor now calling on the federal government to take action, saying thousands of migrants who've been sent from Texas are now straining his city's resources.
We have almost filled every single available hotel room in the city and county of Denver.
Now, as for the reasons behind this recent dip in number, officials have credited Mexico in increasing law enforcement, although they have not publicly shared details on how that country is cracking down. Also important to note that around this time of year, migrant crossing numbers do typically take a bit of a dip. But that migrant caravan we've been reporting on, at one point numbering up to 8,000 people. At last check, the Mexican president says that number is now closer to 1,500. And that group of people does not appear to be moving for the last several days in deep southern Mexico. We'll send it back to you.
All right, Morgan, thank you very much.
We've got much more to come on this hour of Morning News Now, including the secrets of Jeffrey Epstein's clandestine life, expected to be unveiled as soon as this week. What we're going to be looking for when those court records are revealed.
But first, we are counting down to the Iowa caucuses. Now, less than 2 weeks away, we'll bring you the GOP state of play in the run-up to a critical 2024 litmus test. Stay with us. Welcome back. If you can believe it, we are less than 2 weeks away from the Iowa caucus. Former President Donald Trump holds a commanding lead in the GOP primary, but the battle for second place is heating up between Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley. NBC News correspondent Vaughn Hilliard has the latest here.
Waterloo, thank you very much. It's great to be here.
With the Iowa caucuses less than 2 weeks away, Donald Trump towering over the GOP field and flexing the power of his die-hard base.
The poll numbers are scary because we're leading by so much. The key is you have to get out and vote.
The former president boasting a 30-point lead over his closest rivals in the Hawkeye state, gaining strength despite growing legal challenges, 91 criminal counts against him. and 14th Amendment pushes in multiple states to take him off the ballot.
And we're not going to allow them to rig the presidential election of 2024. We're not going to allow it.
What's the next thing they're going to take away? Once they've done that, it's just a stepping stone on to the next thing.
Trump ramping up his rhetoric in recent weeks, openly saying he would act as a dictator on the first day of a second term, and using inflammatory language to describe immigrants.
They're poisoning the blood of our country. That's what they've done.
You don't vote for a personality, you vote for a person who can get the job done.
The caucus now appears to be a race for second place. A recent Emerson College poll finding Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley separated by just 2 points.
Donald Trump is running on his issues. Nikki Haley is running on her donors' issues. I'm the only one running on your issues.
Iowa shaping up to be the biggest test yet for the Florida governor, who has a major ground game in Iowa, embarking on a 99-county tour and scoring the coveted endorsement of Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds.
If you like what we're doing in Iowa, then you'll love what Ron DeSantis will do for this country.
But after a series of awkward campaign moments, his massive momentum coming into the race has all but vanished.
I was a big fan of Ron DeSantis, but as time has gone on, he hasn't really done a whole lot to impress me.
Instead, it's been former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley who has pulled off a late surge, vaulting into second in multiple early voting states.
It's great to be back in Dubuque. I'm excited to be here.
But a notable omission from a town hall answer, now threatening her support. Asked about the cause of the Civil War, she failed to mention slavery, before saying later that it was the cause.
What do you want me to say about slavery?
No, you've answered my question. Thank you.
Next question.
I wish she would have answered the question historically accurate.
The Iowa caucus has occasionally provided candidates a critical boost, helping catapult Jimmy Carter to the presidency back in 1976. But for Republicans, the caucus is notoriously unpredictable of the party's final nominee, as some have found out the hard way.
God bless the great state of Iowa.
Ted Cruz won in 2016, then watched Donald Trump dominate the primaries on his way to his first nomination and White House win. Now, as the candidates make their final pitches to Iowa caucus goers, the question that has loomed over the whole race still remains. Can anyone catch Donald Trump?
And our thanks to Vaughn Hilliard for that report. There are new developments this morning in the Jeffrey Epstein case. A federal judge is soon expected to unseal hundreds of court documents related to the convicted sex offender. Those documents include the names of more than 150 people, from Epstein's alleged victims to his employees to other people with only a passing connection to the scandal. NBC News senior legal correspondent Laura Jarrett has more on what to expect.
Hey there, even after all of these years after Jeffrey Epstein's death, the blast radius from those alleged to have been in his orbit continues to spread. Questions about who traveled on his plane or visited his island reported at length already, but seeing the names in official court records, well, that's another matter.
It's a list of names kept secret for years. But as soon as this week, that may change. Names of more than 150 people, including alleged victims, employees, and former associates of convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein, now set to be revealed. It comes after a federal judge ordered many previously redacted court records, including deposition transcripts, unsealed. Some of the Jane Does contained in the files already widely reported or voluntarily came forward on their own. But speculation has been swirling about some of the John Does that might emerge, particularly among the rich and powerful men alleged to have been associated with Epstein, the disgraced financier found dead in jail while awaiting trial on sex trafficking charges.
It has taken an outrageous amount of time.
Attorney Mark Randazza, who moved to unseal the records years ago, says some of the information could still be kept under wraps.
And this has been a better kept secret than nuclear launch codes.
The records all stemming from a now settled civil suit filed by one of Epstein's accusers, Virginia Giuffre, against Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein's longtime girlfriend. Maxwell is currently serving a 20-year sentence, convicted of grooming young women and girls for abuse by Epstein. Jeffrey posting about the upcoming release of names on X last month, writing, quote, "There's going to be a lot of nervous people over Christmas and New Year's."
Take us serious. We matter.
Jeffrey also sat down with Savannah and other survivors back in 2019.
What does justice look like to you now? Justice now is holding accountable the perpetrators that helped him and participated with him.
Meanwhile, this morning, the anticipated fallout over the list of names spilling out into public view. NFL star Aaron Rodgers appearing to accuse late-night host Jimmy Kimmel of having a connection to Epstein.
A lot of people, including Jimmy Kimmel, are really hoping that doesn't.
Kimmel responding overnight, threatening legal action in a post on X, writing in part, "I've not met, flown with, visited, or had any contact whatsoever with Epstein," adding, "Your reckless words put my family in danger. Keep it up and we'll debate the facts further in court."
NBC News reached out to Aaron Rodgers overnight for a response to Jimmy Kimmel, but we have not yet heard back. Back to you.
All right, Laura, thank you so much.
Well, coming up, we've got some pretty terrifying new video of a violent New Year's Eve altercation involving actor Ian Ziering.
Yeah, this all went down while Ziering says his 10-year-old daughter was in the car. Now the actor calling for action. That's next on Morning News Now. We're back now with a look at new video of a violent altercation involving actor Ian Ziering. The former Beverly Hills 90210 star is calling it an alarming incident. On New Year's Eve, a group of bikers surrounded his vehicle in Los Angeles, then attacked him. NBC News correspondent Liz Kreutz has the latest.
Hi there. This new video shows another angle of this really scary incident. Ziering says it happened with his 10-year-old daughter in the car with him. No arrests have been made, and Ziering is now using this encounter to call out what he calls lawlessness on the streets.
This morning, new video shows the terrifying encounter between actor Ian Ziering and a group of bikers. The 59-year-old says the bikers surrounded his car while he was driving on the famed Hollywood Boulevard in L.A. on New Year's Eve and then attacked him. In the video obtained by TMZ, bikers are seen violently kicking and pounding their helmets on Ziering's Mercedes. It's still unclear what led up to the confrontation, but bystander video shows Ziering confronting the bikers and getting into a physical altercation. Ziering running across the street and attempting to fight back as the bikers chase and punch him. Later, this video shows him consoling his 10-year-old daughter, Penna, who was in the car. Ziering, best known for his role on Beverly Hills 90210 and the Sharknado movies, posting about the incident on Instagram, saying, "While stuck in traffic, my car was approached aggressively by one of these riders, leading to an unsettling confrontation. In an attempt to assess any damage, I exited my car. This action, unfortunately, escalated into a physical altercation, which I navigated to protect myself." Ziering says he and his daughter escaped unscathed, but incidents like this are happening coast to coast. This video from October shows a biker jumping on the car of a mother driving with her 2 kids in Philadelphia. When she gets out to confront him, he pulls a gun on her. And who can forget this horrifying incident in New York City in 2013? A pack of bikers surround a Range Rover after a traffic altercation. The driver, who had his wife and toddler in the car, tried to escape. The bikers then chased him down, pulled him out of the vehicle, and beat him.
How big of a problem is this?
This is a big problem. I think of this mob mentality, like, how dare you honk at me? And they will attack you.
Hey, hey! Following the attack in L.A., Ziering calling out lawlessness in cities, saying, "As a citizen and a parent, I find it unacceptable that groups can freely engage in this kind of behavior, while the response from authorities seems insufficient."
Now, the LAPD has not commented on that statement from Ziering. 2 law enforcement sources familiar with the investigation tell NBC News they are still looking for more video and witnesses in order to help identify the alleged attackers. And meantime, experts say if this happens to you, don't get out of the car if you can. Pull over, call 911, and wait for police to arrive. Back to you.
All right, Liz, thank you.
Well, this morning, the family of Bruce Willis is showing gratitude for the overwhelming support they've received since announcing his diagnosis of dementia. Now, his daughters are sharing some never-before-seen photos and how the Willis family is rallying around the esteemed actor. Here's NBC News entertainment correspondent Chloe Malas with more.
Welcome to the party, pal! It's been nearly 2 years since the family of legendary actor Bruce Willis shared his private health battle with the world. that he had been diagnosed with a rare form of dementia.
How do I really feel about today? Well, how do I look?
Now Willis's wife, Emma Hemming, opening up about the emotional struggles she faces daily.
Holidays are hard. Anniversaries are hard. But for me this year, it has really been about community.
The video posted just days after her touching tribute to her husband, celebrating 16 years together, writing, "My love and adoration for him only grows." And two of his daughters from his marriage to Demi Moore, Scout and Tallulah Willis, sharing never-before-seen photos with their dad. In one, Scout rests her head on Willis's chest, and in her Instagram caption, she writes in part, "Welcome to the joy." Tallulah reflecting on the past year, sharing this photo holding her father's hand, writing in part, "Found myself, found my life, found my health." Willis's family first announced his diagnosis of aphasia in 2022 and said he would be retiring from acting. Last year, they revealed his condition had progressed to frontal temporal dementia, or FTD. The disorder can cause personality changes and make it difficult to speak or comprehend language. Emma sat down with Hoda in September to talk about her husband's condition.
Does he know what's going on? Is that something that he is aware of?
Hard to know. It's hard to know.
Yeah.
Now, as Willis's family continues to play a supporting role in the action star's health battle, they're thanking those who have stood by their side.
Please find support. Find your people. It honestly feels like the biggest, warmest hug.
Our thanks to Chloe Malas for that report and the latest there. But we've got some breaking news out of Iran this morning. Local officials say more than 70 people have been killed and hundreds left injured in twin explosions. It happened at a ceremony marking the 4th anniversary of the assassination of a top commander who was killed in a U.S. drone attack back in 2020. The region's deputy governor described the blasts as a terrorist attack. Rescuers are said to be on site attending to the wounded. We will bring you more as we have it.
Coming up, we're going to start 2024 off on the right foot with a closer look at some of the best diets for those looking to eat a little healthier in the new year.
So what sort of foods should you have your eyes on, and how are those trendy weight loss drugs now playing into diet plans? We'll break it all down up next.
We're back with financial headlines this morning. Samsung planning to take its turn with AI in 2024.
CNBC's Silvana Henao joins us with that and other money news for us. Hey, Silvana.
Savannah, Joe, good morning. Yeah, well, Samsung is leaning into what else? AI this year. The smartphone maker announcing plans to launch its next flagship device on January 17th, likely the Galaxy S24. Now, the teaser to the launch promises, quote, Galaxy AI is coming. Data from Counterpoint Research estimates more than 1 billion phones with built-in generative AI features are expected to be shipped by the end of 2027. ChatGPT, which generates text or images based on user prompts, is at the forefront of the AI wave that's swept across the tech space. Warren Buffett and Nike founder Phil Knight are among the top charity donors from last year. Buffett topping the annual list from the Chronicle of Philanthropy with his $541 million gift to the Susan Thompson Buffett Foundation, named for his first wife. The list of gifts from individuals or their foundations topped $3.5 billion. 8 of the top donors on the list are multi-billionaires, and their combined net worth is $305 billion. And Mountain Dew's Baja Blast is coming to a grocery store near you. The popular soft drink had previously only been available at Taco Bell. PepsiCo says it will now be sold in stores nationwide starting this month, and for the first time will be available throughout the entire year to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the drink's launch. Customers can also scan the bottles or cans to collect coins to redeem Baja gear and Taco Bell food. Mountain Dew Baja Blast will also have its first ever commercial during the Super Bowl, guys.
I have to admit, if I'm eating Taco Bell, I do like a Baja Blast.
No, I've never had one. I don't even know what it tastes like.
This is you like that, don't you?
Show him
the
and the
perfect
peep
setup
soda
to
and
our
Baja Blast. Oh my gosh.
To our next story.
I don't know. All right.
Thank you.
Bye,
well, one of the top resolutions for 2024, a lot of us, 32% of Americans in back say it's their goal to get their diet in order. Probably doesn't include Baja Blast.
I'm guessing there's not a Baja Blast diet.
For the new
U.S.
year.
News and World Report. Report is releasing its ranking of top diets in 2024 to help you jumpstart your journey into better eating.
That's right. And Gretel Schuler is here with us for more on this year's diets, what we got to know about what are the best things for the new year. She is the managing editor for health at U.S. News and World Report. Gretel, good morning. Thank you very much for joining us on this.
Thanks for having me.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Let's start with the best overall diets for 2024. What do we need to know?
So we ranked 30 diets. At number 3 for best overall diet is the MIND diet. Basically, it's a combination of 2 well-studied diets, the DASH diet and the Mediterranean diet. And this is a diet really about focusing on brain health. So you're focusing on foods like nuts, berries, dark leafy greens, and foods rich in omega-3 fatty acids. So that would be like salmon and herring.
And then you have the DASH diet as number 2.
DASH diet is number 2. DASH stands for Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension, and that's exactly what it does. It focuses on limiting your sodium intake and your saturated fat intake. That's fatty meats and tropical oils. Still very focuses also on heart-healthy things like fiber and heart-healthy minerals like potassium and magnesium and calcium.
And then the big number 1, of course, big shocker, right?
For the 7th year in a row, Mediterranean diet takes the top spot. It's real no surprise. I mean, it really is more a lifestyle approach than a diet. No rules, no restrictions. It tastes good. And it's backed by decades of studies to support numerous health benefits.
So that is, we often think diet, we automatically think weight loss, but really you're looking at overall diets here as overall health. But if you are looking specifically at weight loss, what did you find then?
Absolutely. So if you're looking specifically to lose weight at a healthy rate, Weight Watchers was our number 1 choice. Now, Weight Watchers is a membership-based diet, which for a lot of folks that's helpful because it provides a lot of support and guidance like one-on-one coaching, an app that tracks your food. It works using a point system, so foods have a point value. And the nice thing is no food is off limits as long as you stay within your point budget. So you won't feel restricted or punished for being on the diet, so to speak.
And full disclosure for me, I mean, years ago, I had to lose a lot of weight, and Weight Watchers was how I lost the weight, but it was just the idea of tracking. That was what was key. You're tracking and you're keeping your intake into a certain...
Well, because you become more aware of what you're eating,
exactly.
right?
Yeah. And you said it really worked for you.
I lost like 40 pounds.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah.
How did these drugs that we've been talking so much about, Ozempic, how does that kind of wade into the diet conversation that always starts in January?
Right. So there's no doubt that these weight loss drugs are definitely changing the landscape of the diet culture. And for some folks who've struggled with weight loss, they're a game changer, right? And we have, just to give you a sense of how things have changed, when we started in 2023, none of the diets we ranked were using or offering these weight loss drugs. Now, 4 of the diets we rank offer those weight loss drugs. What I want to add, though, is they definitely work, but at the end of the day, you still have to eat healthy, you still have to watch your portions, you still have to exercise. So if you are planning on taking these drugs, you should definitely speak with your doctor, and also before making any changes in your diet in general.
Very quickly, what goes into making this list?
Yeah, what's your methodology?
So we have 43 experts. They're doctors, they're dietitians, they're academics. Basically, it's their job to study the science of healthy eating. We worked with them to evaluate diets, and we worked with the Harris Poll to develop a rigorous methodology and survey that was then used to evaluate these 30 diets.
All right. Gretel, thank you. We are into our new year, new us, so we appreciate it. Thank you very much. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Coming up, where is the beach? Well, we know it's not in Palm Springs, California, right?
The city might be in the middle of a desert, but our own Jacob Sobroff found out that doesn't mean surfers there can't find the perfect wave. We'll explain after this. Surfers have always traveled the world in search of the best waves. Well, now a new surf club in a place you definitely would not expect is changing the way surfers hang tag.
Yeah, for sure. NBC News correspondent Jacob Sobroff hits the waves and takes us along.
It's a strange feeling to be on an early morning surf quest while going east into the desert. But with the opening of the Palm Springs Surf Club, board-toting surfers could become a permanent part of the landscape. We got a chance to test the waters just before the official public opening. There are settings for every skill level, from the Waikiki beginner version to the more advanced barrel option.
I've loved working on the Today Show. This is going to be my last shoot ever.
That one takes a little getting used to.
I'm in the desert. I'm surfing. Everybody's still alive. A great success.
Built on the side of an old waterslide park, the 21-acre site's been years and some $80 million in the making. Clips from pro surfers like Jamie O'Brien have been bringing in some eyeballs online. But developers Vinnie Smith and Colin O'Byrne say it's designed for everyone.
And this business is about entertainment, and we can't wait to watch beginners get in the pool and progress up into being an intermediate. Intermediates going to advanced. I mean, that's what this is about.
The average person will be able to come in here and surf. Is that fair to say?
And also just enjoy the park.
The goal, to make inland surfing as normal as skate parks.
What do you say to purists who say the only way to surf is in the ocean?
Most of the purists that I've seen out here are pretty excited to see waves.
This is the first of its kind in Southern California, and it's part of a global gold rush of man-made waves. In Abu Dhabi, Kelly Slater's promoting his company's technology, a train-like foil creating one perfect peeler at a time. At the Surf Lakes facility in Australia, a huge hydraulic plunger pumps out peaks in all directions at once. In South Korea and Brazil, wave garden pools use a system of paddles to create a variety of rides.
Hey, I'm gonna ramp up, so get them in position quick.
Here in Palm Springs, the wave's energy comes from a patented system of air jets designed to allow up to 25 surfers in the water at a time.
It's an engineering marvel where the hardware and software compatibility have kind of met up to create what you're looking at back there.
It generates a ton of smiles.
A freshwater version of the perfect wave, an oasis of stoke in the desert.
Ever surfed before?
No, have you?
Yeah.
And how'd it go?
Pretty good, actually.
Okay, so...
Yeah, I grew up in San Diego. I was a little bit of a
I was about to say,
girl.
you should. There's not a single part of my body that's equipped for that. But
let's go try it.
Jacob, thanks for that report. That's going to do it for this hour of Morning News Now.
But the news continues right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.